little bit. Okay. Kum Len and Ablat Gemara. We are up to Daf Kuf Yud Amid Aleph. This Wednesday we complete Masechta Kesuvos. Okay. So says the Mishnah, another din of Adman. Hamaitzi Shtar Chayv al Chaverei. I produce a Shtar Chayv on my friend. Let's say that and the due date comes up at a certain time. And then the Allah and the borrower, the alleged borrower, he produces he produces that he sold a field to them. What do you call it? That a field that was sold to him by the same lender after the expiry date of the loan contract. In other words, it was past the due date. And he says, look, your loan contract is definitely fraudulent. Or he says, I paid it up. Because if I still owed you the money, then you would not have sold me a field and taken $100 as buying a purchase of a field. You would have taken $100 as your payment, as payment of your loan that I owe you. Proves that I paid you or that it never happened. So who do you believe? Adma says that's good proof. He can say, if I would still owe you money, you should take the money and use it to pay off the loan rather than give me a field. The Chachamim say no. That no, the lender can respond and say, no, the lender was very smart. Why? Because the borrower refused to pay. He claimed he had no property, he couldn't pay. So the lender was happy to sell him a property and for full price, and then he would seize the property. And then afterwards he said, you owe me $100 for the loan. And now you have property, and just take the property right back. So he wanted that the borrower should end up with the property. That was his ruse. So it doesn't prove that the star was fraudulent at all. The fact that the guy has a contract, and the borrower has no evidence or no receipt or anything. Second one, at my time, the Rabbanon Luchet first doesn't say the larger Rabbanon. The Shapikam and Adman Luchet has a very valid argument that you would not have taken my money, give me a field. If you had the money in your hand, you would have kept it. Gemara says as follows. But I said that you have a zuzah in those places the customers I first pay for the property. Then after we sit down and we have witnesses in courts and everything else, and we write down a document. Then Kuliyam, there's no argument. The Matzah Amalei, the borrower has a very valid title. You already had the money in your pocket. You didn't have to go through the whole exercise of give me a field and take a field back. You already had the money in your pocket because the star wasn't written yet. You could have then said, look, this money is mine. You want the property, pay me another $100. It would have gone to the trade and you would have won because you had a star. They should have taken the money and paid off the loan rather than give me a field. When is the argument? First they write a star and then the money changes hands. So therefore, the Admin says, you should have kept the money. But the Chacham say no, because in this case, the guy didn't give the money. First, he had to sell the property. So therefore, he was happy to sell the property because he knew he can then afterwards seize the property as payment for his loan. And plus, he sold the property full value. So what's Adma's time? In fact, Adma is hard to understand. It makes sense. So Adma says no. Before you sold the property, you lender should have told a friend privately, two witnesses privately, that you should know the sale is really a sham. I'm just doing it in order to collect my loan. And Rabban hold hold, he can say I don't trust anybody because word will get out, and then he won't agree to buy the field. And that's why he did it. And even though we just learned a couple of days ago that everyone agrees to this concept that chavra is that your friend has a friend, and and your friend's friend has another friend, and so on and so forth. So how come over here we're making it sound like this is the argument of Adman and the Chachamim? Because Adman claims in this case here it's mamish an admission by taking the money. You're proactively taking the money, you're actually admitting that he doesn't owe you any loan because you're taking the money as a property. In this case, you had to say something, even though there's a little bit of risk, but the risk of showing that you're making a total admission is far greater. And the Chum say that even so, they hold that the risk of people not keeping a secret is greater than that other risk. And in the previous one I was talking about, that he just used his field that he's complaining about as a marker, as a boundary for offense. That's not a total admission. So therefore, everyone says you should have told somebody. Anyway, Let's continue the Gemara further. Mishnah. Shnaim, similar case. Shnaim shatir shtacher zeh. Reuben produced a shtacher that Shimon owes him money, and then Shimon produced a shtacher that Reuben owes him money. His admin says, Ilo Yisachayla, the second guy can say the same thing. If the guy who produced the second star loan says, hey, I lent you money. If I still owed you money, would you have taken the money as a loan, or are you taking the money that I gave you as payment for the loan that I owed you? Of course, we're taking it as payment. So obviously, I don't owe you any money because it's a fraudulent star where I paid you back a long time ago. Kate's out to love him and when you borrowed money from me, you should take the money and say, hey, this is the money you owe me. Chachamim say, no, each one collects their debt. What's going on here? Says the Gemara, it will be learned. Two people produce a contract loan against each other. You owe me 100, and the other guy says, you produces proof that you owe me 100. Nachman says, each one collects. And Abshesha says, what's the point? If we're talking about similar amounts or even different amounts, what's the point of you giving me $100 and I pay you back $100? Each one, ends up with exactly the same position they started off with. Just say you keep the money, you keep the money, that's it. Each one just maintains whatever they have, and that's it. And if one loan is greater than another one, I just should pay the difference. Think about it follows. We're talking about there's no cash. You're right, cash, everyone agrees. What's the point of me giving you 100 and giving it right back to me? There's no point in that. What's the point of passing around, the leather back and forth? And they both have exactly the same weights. So what's the deal if you take from the right side to the left side and the left side, and if you swap the right hand to the left hand to the right hand, it's exactly the same weight, and you're carrying two bags of leather. What's the point of making that swap? So, says what follows. There's no cash. There's only property. Now, a Baal Chayv collects from Bainis. Remember, we had three kinds of fields. There's Idius, the best, superior fields. The Bainis, average, and the Zaburi is the worst. A Baal Chayv, a Ksuvah from Zaburi is the worst. A Baal Chayv collects from Bainis, average. And the Zikin damages is from Idius. And a Ksuvah of a woman is always Zaburius. Always. And collecting from Yusayim, also you only take, even though it's a loan, from them you only take the Zaburi is the worst possible fields. The question is, how do you assess what is considered Bainis, what is considered Zaburius, and so on? Do we look at this person, the properties he owns, and then we assess his own property? Forget what the rest of the world, how they value. Look at his own. He has a number of fields. You categorize them. This is considered idiot. This is average. This is the worst. Is that how he works it? Bishaloi and Shami, we work on his own, or Bishal Olam. We don't look at his person. He might only have one field, but around the world, that's considered an average field. Then it's considered Bainis. If around the world, that's considered superior. It's called idiots. Says Gemara. Idiots, Bainis, everyone agrees that if we both had exactly the same class field, idiots or Bainis or Burias, there's no point. What's your point in me giving you a field and I'm collecting your field? It's the same thing. This is what happens. Reuben happens to own one field which is a Bainis, average, and Shimon owns one field which is a Burias. So this is what happens. Each one collects, because it'll be a different outcome. Because he holds with Shalei and Shami. You look at each person what they have. Okay, is Asi Baal Zaburis, came along the owner of the person who has Zaburis, and he decided to collect first with Gobel Bainis. So what does he get from another body? Other guy only has one field, average field, so he takes the average field. But now that he owns two fields, one field compared to the other one is superior. So this field that he sees, which would be considered a Bainis with the other guy, for this guy is considered idios. So when the Baal Chayv comes to collect from him, he's not going to get that field back. He'll get the worst field. It's a burius, because you never get the idios. Is idios. So there's a big difference in the outcome. That's why we say each one collects. However, Reb Shesha says, why swap? Because he holds Kesuvos Daf. We don't look at relative to you. We look at in the industry. What's the universal value? The Bainis will still remain the Bainis, whoever owns it, whoever possession it is. So therefore, Reuben, Shimon collects from Reuben first the Bainis, then Reuben goes right back to Shimon, seizes it right back because it's a Bainis. So he who Bainis and Afshik take back his own. Says the Gemara of Nachman. The Nachman says the owner of the Buddhist collects first. How do you know? Maybe the owner of the Bainis will collect first. If the owner of the Bainis collects first, he'll get the Zaburis because that's the only field the other guy has. And then when the other guy comes to collect, he will also only get the Zaburis right back because the Bainis is considered idios. So what's the difference? My chaz is, why did you deem it fit to Asival Zaburis? But sure that the guy who owns the worst field should collect first, and therefore the outcome, is askew towards him. Let say Baal Bainis, but let the owner of the Bainis come first. The league be Zaburis. Let him collect the Zaburis. Will have the Gabinella. Then he'll collect another guy. Talking about the Kodum Tove. Talking about it just happened to be that way. He's just saying there could be a difference in this case if the Baal Zaburis collects first. So you want to save only first. The only way to collect is you have to take the other guy to the Torah. So they both did together at the same time. Save okay, also me be the other guys at the same time. So what do you mean the Baal Zaburius sees it first? They're both there at the same time. So why make the din that the Zaburius should? That's unfair. That the Zaburius collects first. He'll get a better field than the other one. That doesn't make sense. So what's your logic? Ella, let's get a new answer. This is what happened. This is Reuben, let's say, has two fields on the Idis and the Bainis. And Shimon has only one field as a Burius. One guy says you follow all relative to his. So the guy who has the Idis and Bainis, his Bainis is the field that Shimon collects. But then after Shimon collects it, then what do you call it? And makes sense which way you start first. Because even if the owner of the Idis and Bainis collects first, he will only get Zaburi, that's all Shimon has. And then when Shimon goes back to Reuben to collect, he'll get the middle field because the is a title to the Bainis. So this case, there's a big difference in outcome. It makes no difference who collects first, big difference in outcome. One guy will end up as Zaburi, one guy will end up Bainis. But a master of Sheish is the universal value. So therefore, in both cases, both of them will end up with a Bainis. So now we learned, and our Mishnah, the Chachamim, our Mishnah clearly says that they both collect their two outstanding loans. And they both collect from each other, clearly like Rav Nachman. So how's Rav Shesha going to answer? Now, this is very interesting in the Gemara. You find two people who are arguing, and generally when two people argue, each one believes they're right. And if somebody asks a question on my rival and repudiates what he says, I'll be the happiest person in the world. And yet here we find we find a number of times that Rav answers questions on Abaye, and here we have Rav Nachman answering the question against Rav Sheshes, even though he's the one who's arguing Rav Sheshes, and this has been a perfect proof to support Rav Nachman's view that each one collects on their own. He says, no, you know what's talking about over here? The expiry date hasn't happened yet. I'm talking about one loan was 10 years and one loan was for 5 years. And therefore, at the time when the person needed the second loan, the payment wasn't due yet for the first loan. And you want to know why I lent him the money, he didn't take less payment because he had no right to. The loan wasn't due yet. You cannot take I don't have to pay you before the due date, and therefore when I lent you the money and you need the cash urgently now, so I said, okay, I'll give it to you. I don't have to pay you, but I'll give it to you as a loan. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. Hey, what are you talking about? The first guy took it for 10 years, and the guy took it for 5 years. Is Bahal Lema Adma? So what's Adma's logic? As Adma says, I would have owed you money. Case out of love money. Why would you borrow money? What do you mean? It's a very simple case because the due date hasn't arrived yet. I don't have to pay you, but you need money desperately now, so that's why I lent it to you. What's Adma's argument? Didn't come the time, and the din is we're willing more chazaka that nobody paid before the time because it's not due. What happened was the first one loan was for 5 years, and the second one was for 10 years, and therefore, the first loan was for 5 years, and the second loan I lent him was for 10 years. So let's understand. If the loan of the first loan came due, then why would he borrow the money from me? Why would he borrow from Shimon when Shimon actually owed him the money? Then my time Rabban, why would the Rabban say that no, they're both right, they're both collecting each other? Then Shimon or Adman is right. That there's no way in the world that Shimon would have lent the money to Reuven. If it was the due date that happened, then Reuven would have taken the money as payment. We'd lay matazim the same thing again. And let's say the due date was another 2 years outstanding. Let's do the 5-year loan, but it's the year number 3, and Reuben desperately needs some money, and Shimon didn't owe him the money for another 2 years. Then it makes sense that Shimon lent him the money, and Shimon can't say, "Oh, the fact that I lent you means that I never owed you." No way. The other date hasn't come yet. My time why my time why the admin was let you know what we're talking about here. The also it came on the very last day of the 5 years. Tomorrow he had to pay, but today it wasn't due date yet. Can you say that only one day apart, the fact that I didn't owe you the money, therefore Reuven need the money so desperately that he needs the money today, and we don't believe that Shimon paid it off because Chazaka people don't pay before the due date, or because it's the last day of the loan, tomorrow is the due date, people would pay it off already, and therefore Shimon has a time now. I definitely would have paid you. There's no way in the world I still owe you the money. The people do borrow money for one day because tomorrow, even though Reuben will get the money, but he needed the money today desperately. Most people would, the other ones, there's no way in the world that you'd borrow the money for one day. You would delay whatever the payment you have to make by one day, and because you're getting paid tomorrow. Rabbi Chum is a whole loop shot. He says, we're talking about over here, we're talking about orphans, and by orphans, and that's why there's a big difference between if each one collects it differently. The orphans collecting from the money that they were owed, they'll collect bainis. But the lender who's taking money from the orphans for his debt, he's only getting as a buris, because that's the law. You only get from Yisayim is a buris. So when Yisayim mikbegov, first we say that you collect from, they'll collect money, but the other person does not collect Yisayim. Says, what do you mean? But the Mishnah said clearly, was that grave, was that grave? So he says that grave is a rolling, so ain't like. What the Mishnah means is, first we're learning pshat is that the same will collect the debt that they are owed, but they don't have to pay the cash debt that they owe. I have two problems with what you're saying. First of all, just technically, it says the Mishnah each side collects. So you're telling me that no, the other side should collect, but they're not. That doesn't make sense. Let the person who owes money to the Yisraelim not give them cash, give them property. We had it before already. Let's give them property to the Yisraelim. And even though Yisraelim don't have to pay the father's loans if the father didn't leave any properties, but if they collect a property because of a debt that is owed to their father, that property is as if belongs to the father, and then a lender of the father has a right to collect the property. So the lender to the Yisraelim should pay them to pay off his debt to them with property, and then take it right back. Because he says to Yisraelim, now you have property. I'm collecting my choy back. But let him collect it. Yisraelim should go with karka. Yisraelim that collected property, and the choy of their father, he can collect them. Cash is a problem. Says the Gemara, look, the Italy asks the Buddhist. Why don't we just say like I told you before? Yisraelim has a Buddhist, so therefore the lender to the Yisraelim will collect the Buddhist, and the Yisraelim will collect bainis. These later they eat a bainis. The other Yasmin, the Yisraelim go gobble bainis, and they give it back only the Buddhists. Because no matter which way you look, even if you look at universal price, you don't collect from Yisraelim only the Buddhists. Only the Buddhists. So why don't you say that? Why don't you just give that answer? Says what a honey milli, when it does that is heicha deloy toughest. That's only talking about if they didn't grab al heicha the toughest. If he went to the Seimin and if he goes to just try to collect in another court of law, he should only get the buddies. But if he grabbed the hold of the bainis, we're not going to take it back because by law, he is entitled to a bainis, the lender, and therefore we didn't want to learn that case because it'll end up the same way as well if he grabs it. Next Mishnah finished with Admon and Chonon. In the three different parts of Israel, three regions of Israel when it comes to getting married. Yehuda, we had this before as well a long time ago, but if the Chos and the Kala would live together before they get married or not. There's Yehuda, there's Aveda Yarden, Transjordan, and then the Galil, the northern part of Israel. Ein Maitzian Me'ir Le'ir. Let's say somebody lives in one region of Israel, you cannot force your spouse to move with you to another region, even though it's exactly the same city, same population, very similar. Or Mekrach is a large metropolis, and there's a lot of marketplaces there, and people, big influx of people. So it's a large city. And some say maybe krach usually means a wall around it. Others within the region then might seem to go from one region, let's say from Yehuda to Galil or Galil to Yehuda from one, even though it's a similar size city, you can't force the spouse. But if it's within the same region, similar size city, you can say, look, we have to move for whatever reason. But to change, let's say you want to be a regional and become more urban, go regional, you can't force. If you can force someone with the air is terrible and the allergies are terrible to move to a place where the air is much better and less polluted and less allergies. I think Melbourne is the allergy capital of the world. You cannot force someone to move. You live in a place where the air is good and healthy to another place which is bad. Rashbag says, even from a place where there's bad air to good air, also you cannot force. There's another because even a place which has has good air and everything else, it also can have a harmful effect. In what way? Says the Gemara. I understand from a major city to a minor city. In a krach, everything is available. The marketplace is there. You can buy food. Everything is available. But in the city, in a small city, like a village, a lot of stores aren't there. If you want to go to a site for travel, want to go to hospital, things that the facilities aren't there. I understand why Yeah, what do you call it? You're reducing your lifestyle, and it's affecting you in a bad way. El Mila Krach, my time, but from a city to a large city, what's wrong? Messiah supports people enjoy rural or regional much more than urban. Because living in a large city is actually quite difficult. And she never said, all the people who donated, who live in Shalim, only those people who live in a large city needed a bracha. And Rashi explains what's wrong with a large city, because there's a lot of people there, and therefore the houses are much smaller, the gardens are much smaller, and the houses are very close to each other. As if, that's a big problem. Houses are very close to each other. You can hear what's going on next door. And the air isn't really there. Imagine those days, a city. Imagine what it's like today. But in a village, Rashi says, in a city air, you have gardens, you have orchards, you have parks, and the air is so much better, superior. Says Gemara, what's the Svara Rashbat? My boy, he said that even good air can also have a harmful effect. How is that? Kiddush Shmuel, like Shmuel, because we had Shmuel. Shmuel said that Shinu invested if somebody changes their diet, no matter, even though it's better, it can have an adverse effect. Of course, the Besei Masira, it doesn't say Masira. We'll learn in Sanhedrin all about Ben Sira stuff. Ben Sira is Gematria Yirmiyo because it says that the measures that brought down the Chelkas Mechekik, I think in Even Ezra Shmaruch, that Ben Sira was the son of Yirmiyo, that Yirmiyo left some sperm in a bath, and a woman went there and she became impregnated, and her son was Ben Sira. And he wrote one of the Apocrypha, and the Gemara discussed some things he wrote to him, some are valid, some are not valid. So he wrote in Ben Sira, all the days of a poor person is harmful. Where he eats a normal meal, because that itself is bad. During the week he eats barely anything. On Shabbos is a normal meal, that's actually harmful. Ben Sira, talking about Ben Sira, he also says regarding poor people, he says, Af Leilis B'Shafo Ganim Gagoy. One problem is, yes, sorry. It says also by night bad, it says also their roof, the roof of a poor person, his house is much lower. He couldn't afford the materials. So he collects all the water from all the other buildings in town. He collects on his roof. So Bishral Gagim Gaga, his roof is lower than everybody else's. He ends up collecting all the water, all the storm water and everything else, which is, leaks into his house. And where does he put his vineyard? All the way on top of the mountain. He cannot afford to go lower because the price of real estate is much higher. And the problem with all the way on top of the mountain is that it continuously, the soil gets eroded first and falls down. All the rain goes from their roofs to his roof, and the soil from his kerem ends up in everybody else's vineyards, and he loses out. In other words, a poor person invites more bad misfortune. Mishnah, Hakel Ma'il Yisrael. Everybody can force each other to go move to Eretz Yisrael. The Ein Hakel Moitzian, but you cannot force a spouse to move out of Eretz Yisrael. And this is, as the Torah says, the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Hakel Ma'ilin Lishalayim. Other than like the mitzvah Yisrael, this in your kedusha. Hakel Ma'ilin Lishalayim. Within it Yisrael itself, everybody can force to move to Yerushalayim, but the Ein Hakel Moitzin. But you cannot force someone who lives in Yerushalayim, resides in Yerushalayim, to move out. Echad ha'anoshim ve'echad noshim. Whether it's men or whether it's women, a woman can force her husband to move to Israel and live there, and otherwise he has to divorce her and pay her out of ksula. And the husband can force the wife, either one. Nosa Isha. Now, if the reason is because Isha Eretz Yisrael, there's an opinion that says, talk about Isha Yisrael, big machlek, the Ramban, whether there's a mitzvah of Isha Eretz Yisrael, where the Ramban says there is, and then of course if a mitzvah you have the Milas Esther, everybody else explains the Rambam holds there is no mitzvah, it's only mitzvah if there's a mitzvah at all. There's no mitzvah of Isha Eretz Yisrael. And what do you call it? The associate traces of they will live together about whether there's a mitzvah Yisrael Yisrael today. But there are those who say that a woman does not have the mitzvah Yisrael, only a man, because you have to go to war and women don't go to war. But here, if you learn that the pshat in the Mishnah is because the mitzvah Yisrael Yisrael, it says here echad hanashim ve'echad hanashim. Seems clearly that women do have the mitzvah Yisrael Yisrael just like men. It makes no difference. That's mangrum or anything. And it's not tied necessarily to going to war. But we'll see later. Not say Isha Bet Yisrael. You marry a woman at Yisrael, you get Yisrael, you divorce at Yisrael, no some ways Yisrael, you pay her with a local currency. Not say Isha Bet Yisrael, you go to Gaya, but if you marry, we had it before, if you married a woman at Yisrael and you divorced her in Kapakaya, where there the currency is much more valuable, no, so you still pay whichever is cheaper. Not say Isha Kapakaya, you married in Kapakaya, but you divorced. So again, no, whichever is cheaper. The Gemara is going to try to understand: is it where you got married or is it where you divorced? Because this last part doesn't make sense. Rab Shimon Gamliel says no. Noisin lo memoiz Kapakaya. He says that you pay her out from the currency of Kapakaya because it's much more valuable. Nosha Isha Bekapakaya, the Gisha Kapakaya, that everyone agrees, Noisla and Mois Kapakaya, you pay her the local currency. Says the Gemara, Hakol Mailan, everyone can force to go to Torah. Lasui might include who? I mean, everyone. Who else? Lasui Avodim, to include an Eved Ivri. An Eved Ivri can also force to go to Eretz Yisrael. Ulamanda Tony Avodim. Behadia, the one who has the version in the Mishnah, and yet it says Haka. Who else is included? Living in a region in the world, which is beautiful, and excellent air, to the fresh air and everything else. And you're moving to Eretz in the part which is not so nice. It doesn't matter. Going to Eretz overrides that. The Ein Haka Mitzim was that comes to add Lasui, my Lasui to include Evet Sheborach b'Chutz La'aretz, Evet Knani fled from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. You don't take him back home. We say Zil Zavne, we said say to the owner, go to Israel, sell him to somebody, Hacha Vizil, and go back to Yeshiva's Eretz Yisrael. Because of the Yeshiva of Eretz Yisrael, living in Eretz Yisrael is a good thing, and if we're leaving there. Hakoman Ishlam, you might include one. Let's see him another Yavna of the Ishlam, even though the air might not be as fresh and as good. Nevertheless, you go to Ishlam. Let's say if you live in a bad region. And then you go to answer on a good region, you're not allowed to. But I did turn once we already know that I can force you to leave a city where the air is beautiful in Israel and move to the Shalim, then of course, obviously, once you're in Shalim, you're not allowed to leave. But you're right. Once we bring all these contrasts, you introduce this as well. Build it out further. Who I'm Malalis? The husband said, let's go to Israel. She said, I don't want to. Kaifin Oisalalos, we force her to go with her husband. She refuses. He divorces her, but like Suva doesn't have to pay a Ksula because she refuses to join. But if he Lalos, she said, let's go to Israel. Who he said no. Kaifin Oisalal, we force him to join her. And he refuses. Yates is going to get, but this time he thinks so. He pays her all out. He let's leave Israel. Who not to leave. Kaifin Oisa, we force her. Shalai not to leave. We tell her you have the halacha says you have to follow the husband. You have to remain in Israel. But if not, take she forfeits Ksuba. Who I'm he said, let's leave. He I met us, and she says, Loila, I don't want to leave. Kaifin Oisa Shalai we force the husband to stay in Israel. He refuses, then Yaiti Ksuba. He has to leave and pay her out. Traces here, this limited traces is a very important, a very fundamental traces. The third traces on the page says traces, it's because of Yishuv Etzisrael, Einu Noig Bezman Hazeh. This does not apply today. Number one, the Ika Sakana Zrochim, the Sakana traveling there. Number one. Number two, Rabbeinu Chaim said, Saint Rabbeinu Chaim claimed, said a few days ago that if he would have been there when Rabbeinu Tam passed away, he would have joined the funeral, even though he was a Kohen, because Rabbeinu Tam was a Tzaddik Hadar. The Achshav today, Eina Mitzvah Loda B'Yisrael, says Rabbeinu Chaim, there's no mitzvah today living in Israel. Why? There's a number of mitzvahs. It's far more difficult to keep the mitzvahs in Israel with Shemitah and Truma and Yovel and all that, and Shemitah and Trumas and Maisus. The Kama Oinshin, and how many punishments are tied to them if you don't do them properly. And therefore, since it's possible, just like Shemitah have so many different methods of how to overcome the problem of Shemitah, and each one doesn't recognize the other one. The Lamed Aleim, we cannot be careful and make sure we're not nichshul, we don't stumble. And therefore, best, he says, not to go to Israel at all. Okay, here you have a taste of Rabbeinu Chaim. So you have the Rambam, and here Rabbeinu Chaim says that today there's no mitzvah at all, which is interesting. Okay, let's continue. Just give you a little bit of understanding of what's going on out in the world with people. Obviously, most people hold it a mitzvah, and it's a good thing that's wrong, but yet not people who are against it. At least you'll understand, and tomorrow's more will understand you more. Nasa Isha. If you married a woman, so Tony said no issue. So you married someone to Israel, the gift of coming in divorce, it comes to so you give it a local currency to Israel. Obviously, the commitment starts from when you got married. Alma Basa Shibudin, the moment he committed himself. Amos say, but then you say no issue. He married a Kapakaya, but gives somebody divorced to Israel. You pay the currency of Israel again. So it's not the time of commitment; it's the time of payment. So what's going on here? Alma Basa Gavina is in time of payment. Amar Rabba said, Rabba Mekulik Ksuva Shanukan. This is for leniency by Ksuva, because it's not a debt that you actually laid out any money. This is a halach of Hachamim, and we try and make it easy for the husband. It's Ksuva Ksuva Rabban. You hold that Ksuva is only made Rabban. Hashem Megillah says, no, you give her the money, Kapatkai, the more expensive currency, because Ksuva holds Ksuva the Raisa. Big argument in the halach of the Shani whether Ksuva the Raisa, Ksuva the Rabban. So what have we learned? How much you talk about it? Produce a stock with your friend. Kosa by Bavel. If you produce a loan and you wrote there that it took place in Bavel, then which currency do you pay? Is Magbei Mamai Bavel. You pay it from the local currency of Bavel. Kosa by, so he wrote that the region that it's sold, then Magbei Mamai, so you pay the currency rate it's sold. We're still talking about the same value, but just which currency. And Kosa by Stam, he didn't write down anything. You wrote 100 kesef, but you didn't specify Israel, Bavel, whatever it is. And you didn't stop. Or you'd see a bubble if you produce it, but you just said kesef. Kesef, you didn't say what kind of silver money. So you said see a bubble, magbei my bubble. Use money from bubble. So whatever you produced it, that's the currency you pay. Magbei and Ma'israel. Caused by kesef stam. What about you wrote stam kesef? You didn't write money at all. So in the case before, you didn't write which region. So it depends where you pay. Here you didn't write the word. You didn't write word mice. You just said kesef. No, you didn't write money. You just said kesef, silver. What does that mean, silver? So mashi yitza loiva magbeu. That whatever the loiva wants, he can pay him back with. Masha ain't came b'ksuva. Now, what do you mean masha ain't came b'ksuva? Hi, which case are we talking about? Reisha talks about in the Reisha la fukim the nice respect. So the nice he was got to give the more expensive currency, and he says no. That if it was in the bubble, even though you started out in a Yisrael, you pay the local currency, not like Rishim Ul says you pay for kaput kaya. Kosher by kesef time. It says the word kesef. He just said mashit so like maybe the lawyer can pay whatever he wants. What do you mean whatever he wants? The aim naschem. Why don't you say it's not even money? You're saying he can pay any kind of money he wants. He can pay sloyin, he can pay dinner, punyan, any silver currency, because it doesn't say, and he can say it was the lowest currency. It wasn't silver dollars or silver half dollars. So he said, well, why don't you say it's not money at all? Just say nascha, a chunk of silver. And that's why it doesn't say what kind of money it is. Says the Gemara, it says matbei. The moment because it says a coin, because there's a coin, we know it has to be a coin, can be a chunk of silver. Priti, maybe it's priti, that copper pruta made out of copper, or silver, the equivalent of 100 prutas. There's 100, and maybe it's 100 prutas, but I pay me back in silver. Or priti kaspala of the insha. People don't generally align silver with prutas. A person should always live in Etzisrael. The Gemara is going to compliment living at Yisrael for the next day or so, and all the wonderful things and benefits from being there. A person should live in Yisrael, even in a city with the majority of goyim, while Yodim don't live in Chutzlart. I feel be'ir should be so. Majority of people are. Anyone who lives in Yisrael, as if he has a God. It's as if as if he doesn't have a God. It says. Law says lachem is Eretz Canaan. I'm giving you the land of Israel. Lias lachem lakim. I will be your God. So in Israel, as if you have a God. If you live outside, as if you don't have a God. The chosha ain't darbet. So if you don't live in Israel, furthermore, ain't lelaka. What do you mean you have no God? It's as if you're an idol worshiper. Why are you there? Because you're worshiping the benefits that you have in living in Chutz La'aretz. As if you're idol worshiper. David lamenting the fact that he had to flee at Israel. To save himself from Shaul. He sent me, chased me out, Hashem, from enjoying the inheritance of Hashem. And you said it's as if it's as if you said to me, Lech, go, avoid Elohim, go and worship idols. Now who told him that? He told him that. Allah will tell you, if you live in Chutzlar, it's as if you worship Avodah Zarah. As if you worship Avodah Zarah. And the Mumkacher, who was an anti-Tziyoni, so they asked him, how well does he learn his Gemara? So he said, if you look at the Gemara, I'm just telling you what the Mumkacher said, it's exactly the opposite shot, the way we just said. The Gemara says, if you live in Israel, it's as if you have a God. As if means you don't really, it's as if. You don't really have a God there, because he says, because you love Israel too much more, and as a result of that, you don't follow the Torah mitzvahs. But if you live in Chuzla, as if you don't have a God, I mean, really, you do have one. So he says, if you live in Chuzla, even if you don't, exactly the opposite outcome, because you really do have an Eibishter. If you live so, it's as if you have an Eibishter, but you don't really. So you just see how everybody can take and twist everything around. Tell you about it further. Rab Zayda who lived in Babel, he very much desired to go to Israel, and his teacher Rab Yehuda told him to remain in Babel. And so what he did was the Moabites wanted to go to Israel. Rab Yehuda said, he argued whoever leaves Babel to go to Israel is actually committing Aveda. Because it says in Pasuk, Bavola Yavo, you should go to Babel. V'shama Yiu. Yirmiyah said, you will be taken to Babel, and there you will remain. Ad Yom Pokti Oisab, till the day I command you, Ne'um Hashem, says Hashem. So Peter said, you see clearly, you're not allowed to leave Babel till we're told to. I mean, we're told to. But Abzeda, that's talking about the Kalim of the Beis Hamikdash. They went to Babel and didn't come back. But people, of course, you can come back. We'll stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow. Very interesting about moving to Israel from Babel, and does that mean also Australia or not? We'll talk about it.